As far as video game mascots are concerned, Sonic the Hedgehog is one of the most interesting, at least in my opinion. This stems from his dramatic rebranding over the years, from cute and cuddly to extremely radical to, I guess, radical again, but with a handkerchief. He's up there with some of the greats, like Mario, but has gone through so many shifts in personality and design to better appeal to general audiences. But we aren't general audiences, are we? So get the fuck out of here, you guy. Make way for something darker, something edgier, something cooler. For the uninitiated, Shadow the Hedgehog is the antithesis of Sonic, often his rival, but on occasion his ally. It really depends on what game you're playing. He was created by Dr. Gerald Robotnik to be the ultimate lifeform, and boy does this guy live up to the name. He can bend time through chaos control, he can shoot a gun really good, and he can even match Sonic's speed, which is kind of Sonic's whole thing. Shadow's speed is interesting though, because it is more often than not attributed to his shoes rather than his own physical abilities. That's why, in this episode of Gadgets and Gizmos, I'll be talking about the source of Shadow's speed, his air shoes. So these shoes look similar to all the shoes in the Sonic universe. They're huge, they're gaudy, and they've likely never been taken off. Unlike most shoes, however, Shadow's are a lot more metallic and mechanical. Along the soles are 5 jets, separated in the middle by that divot that all soap shoes have in order to maximize grindability. Instead of running in these bad boys, Shadow appears to skate in them, hovering just a few inches off the ground. How does he do this? Well, when in use, the shoes seem to expel some kind of rocket exhaust from the jets. These jets are usually just strong enough to let Shadow glide above the ground like a graceful speed skater, but he can also increase their intensity to boost through the air, like Sonic. Naturally, being that they're attached to Shadow the Hedgehog over here, they can be used as a weapon as well, turning regular kicks into insane rocket death moves. Now, considering that speed is such an integral part of Shadow's character, I think that it's only natural to wonder how these shoes work. The easy answer would be to say that each of these jets is like a tiny rocket or jet engine, and that's how he stays afloat. But that'd also be the wrong answer. It's been noted a few times in games like Mario and Sonic at the London Olympic Games and Sonic Battle that they're formally called air shoes. So it's fairly likely that the jets are spraying out air rather than another form of exhaust. Of course, it's equally likely that they're just called air shoes because they let him hover in the air. But for the sake of the argument, let's assume that they do in fact expel air. Considering that the shoes let him hover above the ground, we should probably take into consideration some real-world hover tech to help explain this. There are 2 major models for hovercrafts that have currently been developed. The first is a propeller-based model that functions a lot like a mini helicopter. You tend to find a number of large propellers lining the bottom of the craft, and the force produced by the air it pushes downward is enough to lift it off the ground. So this model does push massive amounts of air downward, but it's important to keep in mind that the propellers being used need to be exposed to the open air, and are usually pretty big and numerous on a single hovercraft. Shadow's shoes are ridiculously big, but they need to be some insane clown-tier shoes to really house those blades. The second major model is far more compact, and it's an electromagnetic hoverboard. You know how 2 magnets can either attract or repel each other, depending on their polarities? Well, this is kinda like that, except your traditionally weak magnets are substituted for several electromagnetic generators. Magnetism is a whole thing, but very briefly, by carrying a powerful electric current through these generators, you can create an equally powerful magnetic field. In turn, this field can be used by the board to repel the ground, but only when the ground is metallic. Since we've seen Shadow hover over a highway, a forest, and a desert, it's already unlikely that Shadow is using electromagnetic shoes. Plus, what'd be coming out of those jets? Concentrated magnetic force? I don't think so. Now I know what you're thinking. I can't possibly try and find a real-world alternative to these shoes when they're attached to a genetically engineered super hedgehog that was grown on a massive research satellite that was capable of blowing up half the moon. Rational science has been thrown out the fucking window into a dumpster that was already on fire and then sent into space to drift for eternity. So, all things considered, I think we're able to make a few cognitive leaps to explain things. First and foremost, we have to explain the air. How do these high-tech sketchers keep that nasty boy afloat with all that hot air? Well, after some careful analysis, I'm willing to propose a theory. The answer is an air compressor, or at the very least, a high-tech, high-pressure miniature air compressor. Allow me to explain. Compressors store large amounts of air within their tanks and pressurize the air so that when it is released from the tank, all that pent-up air will blow out rapidly with substantial force behind it. These air compressors are usually used as a means of running different power tools, like how the air can be used to fire nails out of a nail gun. Let's consider that Gerald Robotnik managed to make an air tank small enough to fit within Shadow's shoes, that could also compress air to the point where, when expelled from the tank, it'd provide enough force to lift that sweet hedgehog up off the ground. Hell, it might be more plausible that there are 5 small tanks all along the sole of the shoe, each expelling its air through one of the 5 jets. Stick with me though, I've got a bit more to support my theory. Shadow's pumped up kicks don't just blow out regular lamoid air. No, they blow out massive amounts of hot air. So how's the air get so hot? Well, when a gas is trapped inside a vacuum, increasing the pressure increases the force this gas produces, but it also increases the overall temperature as well. This phenomenon is known as Gay-Lussac's law. Because the molecules in the gas have much less space to move around, they start moving around the space much faster. And when all those little round boys start moving fast, the gas as a whole gets way hotter. Bada bing, bada boom, you've got some hot blasts of air that your local rude hedgehog can use for sweet kicks. Of course, the air in these tanks is finite. It's not like with fan blades where you can just continually blow the air around you downwards. You need to fill up these tanks in order to blow anything out. This is where the inner workings of these shoes becomes a lot more complicated. There are what appear to be 4 tiny holes along the heel of each shoe. Holes that could be used to siphon air in to fill up the tanks. Of course, they'd need to suck in massive amounts of air to fill them up, and at impossible speeds to keep them full even while Shadow is on the move. So let's double the number of tanks, setting one group as active and one group as inactive and awaiting refill. Those inactive tanks could quickly get their refill while the active tanks are in use, and then, as soon as the active tanks are empty, the 2 groups switch jobs. It's a bit of a complicated cycle, but a machine this advanced has earned the right to be complex. Now, before we can put a pin in this, there's one tiny detail left to discuss. Shadow seems to have some control over the intensity of the jets below his shoes. He needs some way to adjust their intensity while running. So, we have to talk about Shadow's feet. For those of you brave enough to keep watching this video, I'll keep it brief. There's likely some sort of mechanism built into the insoles of the shoes, where, depending on how much pressure is applied, and to what regions it's applied to, the intensity of the jets can be adjusted. Shadow the Hedgehog is incredibly adept with his feet, and I am now ready to die. So there you have it. That's my take on Shadow's air shoes. But it's just one of many possible explanations. It's a whole lot of work getting that hedgehog moving so fast, but we can't all be as naturally speedy as Sonic. What he lacks in speed, he more than makes up for in attitude, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Maybe now that I've cracked the code on Shadow's nasty footwear, Sega will go ahead and make the Shadow the Hedgehog sequel I've been begging for. Fingers crossed. Thank you for checking out this video. If you have any opinions on this theory or any other tech that you'd like to see me cover in the future, just let me know in the comments. Have a radical day!